Hey everybody, we're going to do another around the world update today, and as always we're going to start here on my 29 miscellaneous. Not a lot going on here. I recently had an issue with my large angelfish right there in the center, and I'm still not 100% sure what to make of what happened. I'm pretty sure what I believed to be a he turned out to be a she, and was simply gravid. I thought perhaps he was constipated. It was very swollen in the abdomen, did not look normal, and after several days, the fish exhibited behavior that looked as though it was depositing eggs. I never did see any eggs being deposited. I never saw its bowels being moved or anything, but the next day everything looked fine, and we're back to the fish looking normal. So I always was under the impression that that fish had been male. I did have a mated pair in here, and the other one had died, and I did witness on many occasions the other one actually depositing eggs, so I always assumed it was a male and a female. It is likely that they were simply going through the motions and both of them were female. So there's a good chance that this fish right here was female all along, and I always just assumed it was a male. At any rate, everything is fine. The swelling went down, whatever that swelling was caused by, and everything is back to normal. Other than that, no real issues, nothing really going on in this tank. I haven't done anything, I haven't lost any fish in here. I haven't even done a water change or anything in the last week or so. So moving along to my gourami tank. I recently lost my whiptail catfish in here, and that's about the only thing I can think of that I've got going on. I did a water change recently and removed some plants. That's just, typical run-of-the-mill maintenance kind of stuff. I did lose the whiptail catfish, as I said. I'm not really sure what happened or why I lost it. I don't know if just my water being just not quite right for it took its toll, and over the approximately year that I owned the fish, I think it just, it took its toll. If the water hardness isn't right for an animal, if it's harder than it should be, or the water's harder than the fish is used to, or the water's softer than the fish is used to, that does play a role in the fish's health. It's a very significant role, and it affects the kidneys and pretty much the whole fish. So if the fish is slightly out of its water, then it's okay, but it does take its toll and it wears it down and beats up on it a little bit. So that's what I suspect happened. I suspect that it was close to being in water that was suitable for it, but it was just never quite there, and it just stressed the fish, and eventually after about a year it just couldn't take it anymore, and I think that's why I lost it. The only other possibility I would say would be that it would starve to death. There is very, very little in the way of off-walks in this tank, and that fish was an off-walks grazer. I do have a lot of those types of fish in here, the little otocinclus and the rubber lip plecos, and you can see they keep the tank just sparkling clean. There's no real surface growth or algae or anything growing in there, and the whiptails are pretty much specialized off-walks grazers, so despite me throwing lots of algae wafers in there, it could simply be that the tank ran out of food source for the fish and it slowly starved to death. I suspect that that is also a likely possibility. I'll never know for sure, but those are my two guesses as to why I lost that fish. Over here we've got my angelfish tank. The room is still a mess, so I gotta stand where I can to try to get as much of the tank in the video as possible. I recently did some work on this tank. I removed a little more of the substrate. I brought a bunch of the Java fern that I had in my gourami tank that we were just looking at. I cleaned some of that out, moved that over here. That's still doing well. I haven't really seen any die off or anything that I was expecting. Usually when you transplant plants, you put them in different water, you put them in a different tank, or you cut the root masses up, or do anything that's going to send a shock through the system of the plant, you tend to get a little bit of a die-off before they start growing back and acclimating to their new environment. But I haven't seen any of that. I'm really happy with the way this looks now. So we are due for another water change here. I need to get in and vac a little more of that gravel out. The goal is eventually to get all that white sand out of there. I've never liked it, and so now it's time to just move on and get it out of there, and eventually I'm going to get some dark substrate put in. I'm also going to work on getting more of this cyanobacteria out. I also took one of the light fixtures off the top of this tank. I used to have two of these Coralife T5 units, one on the front edge and one on the back edge, and I removed one because, first of all, it was completely unnecessary. That was just overkill for lighting on this tank. As you can see, it's quite brightly lit and looks lovely. So that was about the only things that have gone on with this tank during the last week or so. I can't think of anything else worth mentioning in here. Doesn't mean there isn't anything, I just can't think of anything. My Black Ghost Knifefish just got a nice big old tank cleaning. I did the glass. The water was fine. I know it looked like a swamp when you looked at it from the outside, but that was only because the glass was so filthy. The water inside was fine and crystal clear and everything. It was just I hadn't wiped the glass down in so long, and I'd also let the plants grow so out of control and thick that the lighting in there was just so subdued you could barely even see into the tank. Now it looks like I do need to get in there one more time and pull that dead leaf out. And there was a tiger barb in there that was swimming really funny, like it was on its last legs. It was very listless and kind of swimming around in odd circles, and it was up near the surface yesterday, so I don't actually see it in there at the moment. That doesn't mean it's not in there. It might have died. It might be back in some nook or cranny somewhere. I don't know, but I will look for that. The other thing, I still have not gotten to it. I really need to. If you will see my heater back there, you see all the water inside the glass? That's really not good. That indicates I've got a broken seal somewhere. They should never have water inside them. If you've ever got a tank heater and you see water inside it like that, that is defective. It's broken or something. They're not meant to do that. You're not meant to have water in there at all. I'm not too worried about it in a right here and now sense. If the water hasn't really gotten to do anything other than beat up on the glass, the chances of me having a short circuit or a fire or something aren't that immediate, but they are still very real, and I really do need to get in there. And in fact, when I'm done this video, I will get in there and pull that out. At the very least, if nothing else, I can just go ahead and unplug it. In fact, I'm almost wondering if it's not completely defective, if it simply doesn't work at all, because I have noticed a few times, the reason I even looked at the space heater and moved it, or the tank heater and moved it, was the last couple of water changes I've done, I've noticed that the water was a little colder than it felt like it should have been. So maybe that has stopped working altogether, and that's why the tank has felt a little colder than normal the last couple times. So that's definitely something I need to get in there and look at, and I will plug it in once I get it out of the tank and see if the space heater, or the tank heater, I always call them space heaters, I'll see if the tank heater itself had failed with that water in there. So that'll be something I can talk about in the future once I get that out of there. But I will be doing that as soon as I'm done this video. That's something I really need to get on. My 125-gallon native tank. Oh, let's see. When was the last update I did, and what have I done since then? I've done some more water changes. I've got in there and I've cleaned up algae off the glass again. We're still just working on sort of staying on top of the algae. I changed the lighting around. One of the fixture I was just talking about that came off of my angelfish tank has gone onto this tank. So this end, the right-hand side, 2/3 of it, I should say, the 4 feet towards the right, has a shop lamp in the rear, or the rear part of the tank, and then the forward part of the tank has that 4-foot T5 Coralife fixture. And then if you'll notice all the sort of shimmery, sparkly water down on this end, I have a series of LEDs on here. I also want to make a little note about the LEDs. I've shot some videos where I've talked about the LEDs creating this sparkle effect, and I've talked about how it is the LED itself that produces the near parallel wavelengths of light, and I've always assumed that's what gave it the sparkle. But now, the more I think about it, the more I don't think that's the case. I do have another LED. It was a small one that I had on this tank that was actually for a reef tank. I showed it to you in a previous video. I put that on the tank by itself with no other LED, and I got virtually no sparkle at all. I was really surprised. So I removed that and I put these low budget LEDs on here, and suddenly I get the sparkle again. So I'm now thinking that it's got something to do with the hertz. That's Hertz, hertz. And that is basically how rapidly the electrical signal or electrical current pulses through the chip. And that flickering, while it might not be enough for our eyes to detect, the flickering light as it goes through the water may actually be giving us those shimmers and sparkles like that. It could have something to do with the lensing on it. Maybe the higher quality LED that I had that did not give us that shimmy and sparkle like that. Perhaps it was the lensing on the LEDs. I'm not quite sure. But I did find it interesting that the other unit did not give us this kind of glimmer and sparkle at all. It was as though I had a compact fluorescent light above it, and it was an LED. So I definitely need to rethink my theory as to why the light sparkles like that. Otherwise, sorry about that little tangent. That was just something that popped into my head. Oh, look, we get to see my little crayfish out. I was just about to start talking about him. His color has changed quite a bit since he's gone in this tank. The other one that is still in my crayfish tank that we'll get to at the end of the video here still looks very dark, sort of muddy brown color, and has like some purple tones and looks what I normally expect to see a crayfish like. That is what this one looked like until I put it in this tank. Now that it's been in this tank for, I don't know, maybe a week or 10 days, its shell color has completely changed to this sort of rusty red brown color. Don't know if, it's definitely not the diet. I haven't, I'm still feeding it the same shrimp pellets and fish food. One viewer suggested that the shell color might change to mimic the background color. I don't know. I have no idea if that's the case or not. I do know that their diet will affect their color. But again, I haven't changed the diet, and I wouldn't think it had been in there long enough that the diet would have time to shift its color that dramatically. So perhaps it is simply adapting to being in a new background with different lighting and different color substrate behind it. I'm not really sure what's going on with that. Don't think I've got anything else going on in this tank. I still have not positively identified my mystery fish. The tilapia and the Mayan cichlid are both growing like weeds, and they are getting more and more aggressive towards each other. So we're going to have to see how that goes. It won't be too much longer before I'll be getting rid of them anyway, as we move into the warmer weather and I can actually start stocking this tank properly. I also have a ghost shrimp in there somewhere. As I put the Mayan cichlid and the tilapia and the mystery fish in there, I also put a ghost shrimp in there, and I have not seen it, but some viewers have pointed it out that have noticed it in some other videos. So I don't know if that's still in here or not, but we'll see. I do know that I still have plenty of ghost shrimp in my snail tank here. I've also put some Java moss, and we're going to hope that we can get some breeding going on. I did have some people suggest that the ghost shrimp need to be in brackish water to breed, and that's not true. They can breed in freshwater. The problem is the the larvae are very difficult to feed. They need really tiny food. And what happens is most people that attempt to breed them don't have enough or the proper food, and the larvae die before they're really big enough to even be noticed in the tank. And people think for that reason they're unable to breed in fresh water. So one of the things you can do is use Java moss as sort of a breeding mop, and apparently the Java moss produces small enough particles of Java moss that the larvae can eat it, and it also allows for a little sort of microscopic organism to grow that they can feed on until they're large enough to start eating bigger stuff in the tank. So hopefully I'll be getting some breeding going on with my ghost shrimp in there, and I can add to my snail collection and my shrimp collection, and we'll see where we can throw some shrimp around in some other tanks for live food and that sort of thing. My Gudgeon and T-bar tank is not really a whole lot going on here as far as any kind of changes happening. Let me get my drop cloth straightened out here. You can see the T-bar has still been hard at work. I have sort of thought of a name for my T-bar. When I was a little kid, there was a book for children called Digger Dan, the Steam Shovel Man. And of course, when I was 5 or 6 years old, I loved it simply because it had my name in the title. And yes, it did talk about a steam shovel, so I'm dating myself a little bit there. But this guy, whenever I look at him now, I always think of him as Digger Dan, the Steam Shovel Man, because he just gets in there and moves soil, moves sand around. That's what he does. It's his thing. And he loves it. I don't know why. I guess it's nesting behavior or whatever. I don't know if he's sifting through looking for food, but that's just his thing. When he's not up against the glass like this waiting to get fed, he's swimming around, moving sand around the tank. So it's fun to watch, but it's a little frustrating if you want the tank to look a certain way. I long ago gave up and decided he's the one that has to live in there, not me. So he can, arrange the furniture however he likes it as far as I'm concerned. My Gudgeon here has learned a new trick, and I will get it on video one of these days. Sorry for all the drips and runs on the glass and everything. This is just a spur-of-the-moment video. I thought I'd do it while I had the time. But my Gudgeon has learned the trick of actually jumping out of the water and breaching to snatch food out of my fingers. I first noticed the behavior when he jumped out and bit my finger. The second time he jumped out of the water and bit my finger, I decided I was going to see if I could get him to actually jump out of the water and take food out of my hand, and he does. If I hold a little piece of krill up about an inch above the water, maybe half an inch above the water, he eyeballs it up, and then he makes a jump for it, and he snatches it right out of my hand. I have to learn to steel myself a little better for it. I jump and, drop the shrimp every time he does it. It scares the hell out of me. So once I get a little more used to him jumping out of the water and snatching the fish out of my hand and can hold my hand a little more steady, it should be a little more interesting. I still don't know if they've got teeth or not. I haven't actually been, had any kind of injury or scrapes or scratches or anything like that from being snatched by him a couple times. But it's still always odd when an animal jumps up out of the water and chomps onto the end of your finger because they think it's food. So I will be getting video at some point of him doing his new trick and jumping out of the water and taking shrimp out of my fingers. My 125 here. My Ctenopoma has also learned the trick of coming up out of the water and snatching food out of my hand. And I also, on the same day, learned that he knows how to do that because he, too, jumped up out of the water and chomped onto the end of my fingertip. So this one was a little more aggressive because he's a pretty good-sized fish, and when he comes up out of the water and puts a chomp on the end of your fingertip, it's a little more noticeable. Again, there was no injury. I don't think he's got any teeth to speak of other than the kind of teeth like a bass or a sunfish or something would have, those sort of little bristly things. But again, it's just a little disconcerting when an animal like that just, jumps up and grabs you by the finger. So I will try to see if I can get him to do the same trick of taking the shrimp out of my fingers. I haven't really actually spent any time seeing if he'll do it or not, but we'll see if we can't do that in the near future here too. Don't think I've got anything else going on in this tank to speak of. I did lose a Congo Tetra. It turned out to be a male. I thought when I was looking at it in the video, I thought it was a female. It did turn out to be a male. And when I pulled it out of the tank, it had one sort of swollen spot on its side near the vent, but not the vent itself, was sort of swollen and had a red lesion. So not really sure what that was about either. It almost looked like, to me, I got it out of the tank because all I could imagine was like that thing bursting open and releasing, a sack full of squirmy parasites or something into the tank, because that's what it looked like. It looked like a big boil that was about to rupture or something. So not really sure what that was, whether it was some sort of parasite that got into the skin or if it was some sort of infection that was actually causing, pus to build up on the inside or something. Not really sure. But that's what was going on the Congo Tetra that I found, and of course I took it out, euthanized it, and disposed of it, and that was that. Other than that, I don't think I got anything going on in this tank that I can remember, so we're going to move along. My Brackish Tank. Not too much going on in here. I did put some of the shrimp. Moved my hand too quick and scared the hell out of Butterbean. He's so skittish. After all the years I've had this fish, you'd think he'd be a little less nervous around me. But I did have 2 ghost shrimp in this tank, and there they are, right on top of the heater. So those 2 have still survived, and it's been, I don't know, 4 or 5 days that they've been in the tank now. I do want to get in here and remove some of this Java fern. The stuff that I was just getting ready to show you, but Butterbean came out, so I figured I'll give you a look at him before he darts back into the back and hides again. The Java fern right here looks just awful. You can see these sort of brown lumps growing all over it. I'm not really sure what that is, but I don't like it, and I want to get them out of the tank. This Java fern over here looks fine. It looks like it's actually rooting in a little bit and growing. And then I got this piece right here, and it just looks absolutely awful. So that is going to come out, and I'm going to replace that with another piece that I can just pull out of another tank. We'll see how well it does if I just stick it in there without really acclimating it, and we'll see if it makes any difference. Other than that, I don't really have anything going on in this tank. We're just sort of going to keep our eyes on those ghost shrimp and see how long they survive in the tank with Butterbean. And again, I'm going to remove some of that Java fern and replace it with some better stuff and see if we can't get it looking a little better in there. My quarantine tank is still just sitting here. Everything's fine with it. I haven't had any more issues since I finally got the cycle worked out. I really shouldn't have, slapped it together and thrown fish in there without it being cycled. It did cost me. I did lose some of those coolie loaches, and I did lose a couple of those little Rasbora hets. So right now I've got the Rasbora hets in there, which are just going to go in some tank somewhere. I've always got room for them. I also have somewhere in there, I don't see it at the moment, but as of this morning it was still in there and alive, is a little male cherry barb. I've had a female cherry barb in my angelfish tank forever, and the male got killed. Actually, my Ctenopoma ate the male a long time ago when the Ctenopoma was over in the 40 breeder that is now my black ghost knifefish tank. The cherry barbs were in there. He ate one, and I got the female into the angelfish tank and have yet to ever get another male in there. So I finally bought another male cherry barb, and when he's done with quarantine, he will be over in my angelfish tank, and then we will get to see a bright, beautiful fish, because male cherry barbs look fantastic when they color up as they mature. Last but not least, we've got my crayfish tank. You can see the crayfish right there. This is the one that is still in here by himself now. This is the one-clawed crayfish. And it looks like it's taken to doing some digging itself here in the last few days. It's got the rocks piled all the way up to the surface almost on this side, and it wasn't like that yesterday. So for some reason it's gone crazy with the digging in there. I also did a little bit of research, and I learned how to properly sex them and identify males from females. I've spoken to some people, and people talk about the claw size and the size of the body, and those are guidelines you can go by, but there's one surefire way to tell whether they are male and female, and the only way you can tell is by actually handling them and looking at their underside. So there will be a video coming up soon when I remove this one and put it over into my native tank, and in that video I will actually take the time and we will look underneath of it. We'll find out whether it's male or female, and I will show you how to sex them, provided when I get under there and start looking around I can identify the structures that I'll be looking for. Shouldn't be any problem, so that should be a good video if you want to learn how to sex a crayfish, because you never know when you're going to need to sex a crayfish. So we have come all the way around the world. We're back to the first tank. So make sure you're subscribed. That way you won't miss any of the stuff I just discussed, and you of course don't want to miss the video on how to sex a crayfish, because that's going to be lots of fun for everybody. So thanks again for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and I will see you real soon on the next one.